Ain't going back, not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide, gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side, got all of the loving.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I am here once again with Howdie Mickoski. We had a great talk, I guess it was a couple of months ago now, on the cave, exiting the cave, the only door out. So many questions and comments, and thank you all for watching and laying your suggestions down. So I figured it was good to have, well, from the further conversations with Don Juan, we'll have the further conversations with Howdie Mickoski. And hello, Howdie.
Yeah. Hi, good to see you again. It's been 3 or 4 weeks or something, and here we are.
Hey, we have. So I have a quick question, if I may throw this out right away. So my question for you before we could, to start this conversation is, how would you describe the cave? And I'll have one caveat: we don't use TV or movie references. So how would you describe the cave for the people that we're going to discuss being in and getting out of? Maybe it's a good place to start this conversation.
Yeah, that is a good question. Actually, I don't think anyone's actually asked that in all the interviews to this point. They've all kind of taken it for granted. So I'll do mine, and then I can hear what yours is, what your opinion is. But mine would be, the cave is anything that has, I don't want to say duality either. That's not the right, but has something that can be observed. Let's put it that way. If there's something that can be observed by an observer, that would be, I would say, that's how I would describe the cave.
Okay.
So there's something that can be separate from yourself.
So
so something that can be perceived separate from yourself. That's how I would describe it.
Okay, so we're in a cave, and obviously there's a feeling of people wanting to get out for one reason or 10,000 reasons. And as you say, it seems to be the topic of topics. Indirectly, you asked me what my opinion would be after the fact. Yeah. I think it's a cage of thought, personally. If I'm going to put it in a succinct term as you put it, I think it's a cage of self-reflective thought that has us trapped in manacles of delusion, self-inflicted. That would be how I would put it.
Right, because the challenge for me is people think of they think of the cave when it's presented to them as only materialistic forms. They think of it as, oh, we're talking about the light and like this and my feelings and the books behind me, but for me the cave is the etheric realm, it's the astral realm, it's whatever realm you can. And even to me, the void, what would be the void is even part of the cave, because there's the possibility of, because if there's only observer, if there's only one true oneness, then there would be no experience. Technically, to have any kind of experience needs something to be experienced. So you have to create this idea of separation, which is space and time. So as soon as you start bringing any kind of space or any kind of time in, that's why they kind of say the absolute is beyond second. I've heard it described that way. It's beyond second, which is great because it means it's beyond a second, it's beyond another thing, and it's also beyond time, it's beyond second. So that one word, it's beyond second, means so much in that little sentence.
So the absolute is beyond second, and do you mean the absolute is outside the cave we're talking about? Is that how we're
feels that
it here?
Way? Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Feels that way. I get the sense now, and certainly from my own experiences 15 years ago, that there's a like a absolute copy that you can experience within the cave that seems like you're in the absolute. It seems like you have created this totality, but it seems like it's also part of this bizarre mechanism of the cave. So it's also such a challenge that we're dealing with, because if this, and I'm saying if, right, we're talking, we don't know for sure, but if this is a copy of something real, then it's always hard to make that distinction. Anytime we come to whatever experience it is, how do I know it could be the real experience or the copy experience? Be like if I photocopied like my calendar, and I made a photocopy of the calendar, and I could put it on the exact same paper, how would you know which is the original and which is the copy? So it's these questions that I'm still working with to try to get an understanding of how do we know the difference
between the cave inside and the cave outside is what
yeah, or how what might be what we might at least say is original or the origin of something, and what's the copy. Because again, if it's a really good copy, you would have trouble telling. Like if I could get the exact, it's like they talk about counterfeiters and the concern that because of the way the printing systems are, the printers are so good, if you can just get it's a problem of with the same kind of paper, you could make to the naked eye the almost perfect copy. It's only those watermarks or those little things they add to them now that could to maybe tell the difference. So again, how do you know the difference between the real and the copy? It's a good question from like the Neo's challenge, right? How does Neo know when he wakes up in the Matrix, wakes up when he's all of a sudden on the ship with Nebuchadnezzar and Morpheus and Trinity? How does he know that that's not just a fake realm as well? Why does he accept that as true automatically?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I mean, why would you say it's important to tell the difference between the original and the copy? And what do you even mean by the original and the copy?
Good question. I mean, the challenge, I mean, that's just the way the realm has been presented, as you know, in so many of these texts. And even if we look at the way various shamans that we know that we've read, they don't talk about a copy, but they've talked about it like as a shadow world. That's how they kind of describe it. It's like it's an inverted world, or it's an opposite world. So it's indicating even to them that there's something else that's different from this, but is very close to it, and is somehow opposite, inverted, copied, changed. So that kind of idea exists in almost all the ancient traditions and native traditions that we look into. The question becomes, yeah, okay, if it's a copy, what's it a copy of, and how did it get copied? And like you say, I mean, that would be part of being fooled, right? It'd be if we were signing a document, if we were signing some sort of legal document that was the copy, but we don't sign the original to the bank or to the whatever lending, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, how legal is it if the copy only is signed and not the original? So all these questions come up as we start turning it into understanding reality.
Well, why is that important, do you think? Like I have a different understanding of what I think this cave is. Right. I've come to a few different conclusions, even since our last conversation. I've had, we talked off camera, and I don't want to, release any private information that we both had, new experiences, let's say, since we've chatted last, that maybe gave us a different understanding of, what the cave is and what the door out could be and how to access, said exit. So why is it important to see it as a copy? Would you say, I don't think it is, but why would you say it's important to see it as a copy? If you do,
I wouldn't say I don't say it's important. I think it's important to question it. Definitely. Because as at this point, I can't prove that it's a copy because I don't have access to the original to be guaranteed. I can say, here's the original, here's the copy. This is just being presented as this is seemingly what a lot of ancient traditions have said. So we should look into that as a possibility. So I wouldn't say anybody should see it as a copy. It's something we should say, okay, what if it is? How would we know it's just another line of examination of trying to understand this place of possibility. But that doesn't mean I can say it is, because I don't have access to the original to prove it.
Right. So we're in a cave. So what would you say then? It seems, and it was one of the more popular videos I've done, that people are attracted to the idea of getting out of this cave. Like if it's a copy or an experience, or you could even say the potential for an infinite experience would be my guess.
Right.
Why is it such a big topic, as you've said before, of people wanting to get the fuck out of here, so to speak?
I think because the recognition is it's insane. It's obvious that this place is set up as just a nutcased insanity. And so think if somebody feels like, I think the feeling starts to come. It's this natural of like, there's a move to try to find balance or harmony, or that, I think that's just natural, right? If something's out of balance, I'd like to be in balance. And so when people start to see, well, the world itself is some ways out of balance, the natural tendency, just like, well, if I've got a sore shoulder, I'm going to find something that can take the pain away or fix the shoulder or make it better, or that's just natural functioning that we have, natural way we operate. So when we see it in a bigger picture, the shoulder of the world is wrong, then I'm going to same idea. I'm going to see if I can fix it. I'm going to see if I can make it better. The problem becomes is when people have been doing this for a long time and find that it doesn't get better. Actually, it doesn't actually get better. So maybe something's wrong with the whole system.
I mean,
I think that's where it begins.
How can you say that? I mean, you've only been alive, let's say 500 years even. That I'm going to, I don't know how old you're. So let's say you've been alive 500 years. I've been alive 500 years, for argument's sake. How do you know?
For argument's sake.
For argument's sake. I mean, this world could be, we don't know how old, we don't know how long. So how could you say it never gets better? I mean, you could say it never gets better in your life, if you like.
Yeah, and you can say certainly in my lifetime, it doesn't get better. And certainly if you look at least the way, I think you say, way history is presented to us, we're not in any kind of things have not in any way improved. If any pieces of history are true, then the suffering machine has gone on here for a long time.
What if they're not? I'm going to play the devil's advocate. Like I went through our last conversation.
That is a theory, right? And that is a completely logical presentation, depending on how people want to see particularly the ancient world and certain other things of very old history. You could potentially, you could make an argument that there was truly this golden age and everything was wonderful here, and everybody was happy, and I mean, and people could produce that thesis. You could produce the thesis.
Sure, I've seen it.
For sure, though, we can say, but okay, now we take our experience, our personal lifetime experience, and our experience of reality doesn't match this supposed much happier place than it used to be. If we're going on that thesis line,
sure, I agree.
So then if you're going to go that thesis, the question is, well, why not?
Good question.
Why is that no longer here? And that's also a valid questioning of, well, what happened, right? What happened to then this supposed place that sounds like, well, I'd like to live in that. That sounds really good. So how did we go then from that to this? And that's another potential line of questioning, a potential line of examination.
I mean, it's really interesting that we've gone down this path a little bit, because like I'm a studier of ancient history. I've studied a lot of the same books you have, from what you've mentioned, and I've looked at past. We both know Autodidactic, and we've gone through the Tartarian mud flood, the alternative, great, timelines, and I've watched hundreds of videos, as maybe you have as well. And then recently, which is very interesting, there's a channel that hasn't been around so long. Edgar Reyes just came up not so long ago.
Okay.
And he has this video of pictures outside of the ice wall, pictures of the mud flood, pictures of ancient Egypt. Very fascinating. I highly recommend it to anybody listening. And he's gone from 2,000 subs when I first picked him up.
Sorry, what was the name of the channel? Just so I got it.
Edgar Reyes. I can send it after.
Oh, okay.
Edgar Reyes. Yeah. That's just his name.
Okay.
And, and so just 2 days ago, I started watching. So I said, outside the ice wall, 1912, some expedition, very interesting, right? So you're looking at all the pictures, and it's like, I've never seen any of them before. There's like 50 or 60, you're going, what's that? What's this? What's that? And he's got pictures of ancient Egypt, supposedly during the mud flood or the flooding waters. I mean, it's easy to fool anybody with a picture, of course, but you're looking at all these statues, and you see some of the pharaohs with their legs crossed, which is strange. I've never seen that before. And pictures of humanoids that are like short and fat, or do not look anything like the maybe 100 Egyptian pictures I've seen before, let's say, or the 200, or however many get allowed out into public from, probably a very controlled situation, from what I've heard, is what, gets let out and not let out. So even in watching this fellow and seeing his videos for the last few days, it's already changed everything about my perspective on reality, just in the images and the statues and the leavings behind from these ancient civilizations. Like I said, what you'll see it. If you check it out one day, you may see what I mean. I guess you're looking now. We have a bit of an echo going on, but
yeah, I just wanted to quickly check it to see what you were talking about, just so I got an idea of what his channel at least looks like. Yeah. Okay.
And so what I'm getting at in relation to what you said about the histories brought to us, I mean, what if it's all BS from the bottom up, top to side? All the mud flood stuff could be made up. I've seen thousands of videos. I'm not taking anything away from anybody. The ancient civilization of 1,000 good years, 1,000 bad. I've heard that too. Jesus came and went. You've heard all of these, the golden ages that have come and gone. Probably you've heard, and all the shaman books we've both read. So you're sitting here going, okay, maybe it's all garbage, or maybe everything I know. I mean, even the movies we've been shared, right? Last time we chatted, you mentioned, we almost got into a bit of an argument over what this world is for 5 seconds about, I think it's a place where you learn. You called BS on that, which is all good. But how do we know anything about the news? I used to be in a newspaper. How do we know anything about what is going on in Africa, or the Turkish prisons, as we brought up last time, or the I've seen the same UNICEF ads about children starving in Africa. Is it real? I don't know. I have no idea really what's going on, other than what I've seen on my TV, in my newspaper. I've never been to those places, is what I'm saying. My own experience would have to be second or third or fourth hand is really what I'm getting at. So let's say everything, even the Castaneda books are obviously not first hand. They're second, third, fourth hand for you and I, unless we've had our experiences. Again, we'll get into that another time. So what do you do with all of that in relation to still wanting to get out of this cage? Still having this feeling.
Good question. I mean, again, this is a challenge of. So we'll start with the history question first, right? Because that's a really, and it's a question that's also a lot of people are digging into, they're looking into history. Okay, so there's been a sense of like something's wrong with the history. The history we presented is a lie. Okay, so people are feeling that, and they're starting to dig, right?
Sure.
And like you say, now the problem becomes, well, we got two issues. One, what are you digging into? Like, what are the sources you even have available to dig into to find out answers? That's one. And then two, we have a question of, well, we're back to playing again this game. Well, what if we're in some type of simulation? Then obviously there's a start point to the simulation, and everything from our perspective before that start point isn't really our experience. So if the start point was 1900, if the simulation, what
do you mean by simulation?
Simulation being like a equivalent of a computer game.
But how would you
like
even so you're just guessing it's a simulation? I mean, like where's that coming from? That
no, there's a lot of information conclusion that would indicate this is highly likely a simulation. Okay. There's tons of data that if you just look at this reality, it indicates it's not what we think it is, that it's a manufactured world.
I agree, but I also 100% disagree. But we can get into that. I don't think it's a simulation at all, but that's just my opinion. I used to think so, but I've had some different ideas.
Yeah, I'm still saying that's a highly likely possibility. Again, I can't say it is or it isn't.
Okay,
it's another one of these things that's possible. But if that is possible, if we're playing, okay, if that is true, then a simulation has a start point. There's a simulation is, no matter what game, if you put in a historical game into your computer as an example, and it's starting in 1740, there was no 1730 in the game. 1740 was its beginning point.
Sure.
So we have this possibility of this Westworld idea where there's a day one where it all starts, and it appears from our world that there's this massive time before that, which may not be true. That might just be a story that's been implanted in for everyone to believe, and it doesn't actually exist. Now, the weird thing is, though, is the story doesn't see, if again, we're playing if this is true. If this is true, and just for fun, let's say it all started in 1800, just for fun.
Sure.
So that means technically everything before 1800 didn't actually exist for us, but it is manufactured in such a way that it doesn't seem like it was just dreamed up. It doesn't seem like it was just made up. It was based on something. So it also indicates that even if we're studying history, and even if it might not be part of our specific simulation, it does seem to be based on something, and it is giving us information. So there's value in trying to look at what's back there. But like you say, say like, okay, so I've been to Abu Sir. There's a really good example in Egypt of trying to understand anything in our past. So we have almost no information about Abu Sir at all. Like, it doesn't matter what Egyptologist you go to, they tell you very, very little in general. There's just nothing to say about it.
Sure.
When you go and examine it, I mean, the place is a gigantic ruin, and it's not like it's just accidentally over time. I mean, this thing has been dismantled, and dismantled quite forcefully. That's obvious based on the way the blocks have been mangled, the way the melting has happened on the granite. I mean, something's happened to this site. Okay. So we can see something has happened to Abu Sir, but we have no information. We have no detail about anything. We have no original sources that can tell us this is what we did here. This is why we built it. This is what happened to it. So we have zero. All we have is a site, and it's very hard to even get on the site. You have to actually either deal with the Egyptian government or deal with the site organizers to make the right payments to even get you on the site. And then once you're there, it's one of the most baffling places I've been. But energetically, it's powerful. It is just like, it's an energetic charge when you're at Abu Sir, and particular places of Abu Sir even more. So, for example, Giza gets all of this, gets all of the media coverage, you might say, all of the books written about it, Great Pyramid, Great Pyramid, Great Pyramid.
Sure.
But here's like a mystery, like 35 minutes away. No one's talking about it. No one discusses it. We have no idea what the hell's going on there. And yet it's there. There's a story there. So it would be a perfect example. How would we get the story? Like, like you're talking about, how do we find this? Like, there's, for example, how would we, like you and I, for example, how would we get the story of Abu Sir from the little information we have available to us?
We couldn't, like, in the normal sense. I mean, I understand what you mean by baffling, because, even the station I just mentioned, the other YouTube channel, they do have mud flooded Egypt. So you see pyramids I've never seen before. Like I said, statues I've never seen before, besides, the three big pyramids, and that's all you see. And that's all you see over and over and over, in King Tut and all this other, whatever, Nefertiti, et cetera, et cetera. And just seeing different aspects and different things that have been hidden gives you, as you've mentioned, a very baffling feeling for reality. And all you've got, as you said, is your feelings when you go into Abu Sir, that, well, probably they're telling you, at the very least, they're being silly by accident. And at the very most, they're being duplicitous on purpose. But why would they be so, like, what is it that they're hiding that's so powerful that you absolutely can't find that out, right? That they're even afraid of the knowledge of a little monkey human, let's say, or whatever you want to call ourselves at this point, going in and like, what are they afraid of that's so, detrimental to their very existence, whoever they are? We can get into that in a moment too, if we like.
So that question, if we follow this particular line of questioning, then this particular line of questioning would take us into what we just were talking about earlier, with this idea of, if we go, here's some pathways of how our world is the way it is. So if we take the world used to be great at one time, and then got really screwed up, and that's where we are now, then this specific questioning that you're bringing up would fit that line, because you could say, well, the only way that we can have a screwed up world like we have now, and the kind of control systems, is to take away the knowledge from humans that there was one time where, in the past, where humans didn't live like this, and humans lived in a very different, more powerful way. And we want to make sure that the humans don't know about it, because if you don't know it existed, then you wouldn't be trying to ask for it back. You wouldn't say, hey, why am I living this way when we could be living that way again? Let's do that. Exactly. So if we do that road, I mean, I would think that would be a simple answer to explain, well, why is if that's true, and I think it is on some level, why is that also covered up? Why don't they want us to know what was back there, and how life existed 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago? And it would make sense if it was humans, right? Not aliens, not some kind of,
Yeah.
that humans manage to create this stuff, and humans manage to deal with this energy, and humans manage to live in a completely different way, then that's inherent in us now. We've just had it shut off.
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, let's look at the other question that you and I are looking at. Like when I said I disagreed with you on the simulation, I want to change my answer to say I think both are true. Right. I don't want to live in duality. I do believe it could be a simulation, but I also strongly feel it's a simulation we are making ourselves. Inside out, 100%, from top to bottom, from the time we get up to the time we go to sleep. And, perhaps that could explain the cave and wanting to get out, and the trickery, and the fact that it seems, I don't know if you've noticed, almost impossible, even for those of us that are trying to get out, to actually get out.
Well, you can't be out while you're in. That's one of the challenges. People are trying to get out, and are wondering, well, who can I talk to that's already out? And, well, that would be nobody, because if they're out, they're not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's
It's a good point. That would be nobody. It's true.
Yeah. So that's one of the challenging points right there. And so we're back to these civilizations that seem to just disappear. Are they ones that did actually exit the cave, and once they exited, they're no longer here? And maybe that's kind of the story that Castaneda is trying to present at the end of several books, where he talks about Don Juan and Don Gennaro, and eventually his whole group just leaving right in this, when he jumps off the abyss, they all leave, and so it's the possibility that they are leaving the Matrix, and so not only are they leaving, they're disappearing from the world. So we have this problem of I'd like to get the information exactly. How do I exit the Matrix? Who do I talk to? Well, nobody, because if someone's figured it out, they're gone. So it's also that potential difficulty. And I think exiting the Matrix doesn't require you to wait until you're dead. That feels for sure. There's so much talk. You've got to prepare for when you die. It's all going to be happening then. And it's I think that's a possible point. But I would also agree that you could do it right now.
I would
this second. You could do it.
Maybe we could replace the word matrix with dream, if you want to go along Castaneda's line, having a different dream, to dream a different way. I mean, imagine, something that's come to me even more strongly, more powerful than when we chatted last is, if you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, and I've had dreams, I don't know if you've had dreams where you've lived entire lives, right? And I've ended up in the same city, civilizations, canyons, friends, and it seems like I've been alive, for 1,000 years, or at least a good 50 years. And then you wake up, you're getting stressed, you're getting old, maybe you have a family. This is all in one night or one evening, or so it seems. And I've had this kind of dream many times. You wake up, you go, wait a minute. I'm not lost. I'm not trapped here. I'm not waiting for my friends to pick me up in the street where, I've had, some of these sort of examples I'm giving. But it seemed, and I'm more tired almost than when I went to bed, because it seems like I've been up for 50 years doing things, whatever that is. Right. And then I wake up here, and then if I write it down, I kind of remember bits and pieces. But generally, as the day goes on, it disappears until maybe I have that dream again, or something triggers those feelings or memories. What if, since we're talking, we're going to circle back to what we started talking about, about a half an hour ago, and we're talking about the cave. What if it's a dream?
Well, here's just that made me think of, I don't know if you ever saw this video that I did quite a long time ago about the prisoner. Did you see that one?
Maybe.
The guy, it's supposed to be a guy who is 12 hours a day. He's awake in this world, and then he sleeps exactly 12 hours. And he claims to be not just dreaming another world, he's actually another person in this reality.
Right.
And that literally they're getting to the point where the other person supposedly is, so that, and the same thing, that person is supposed to sleep exactly 12 hours a day. And what would happen if these two ever met? Now, I'm not saying it's true, but the cellmate, who I guess is the one who was presenting this information, and some other prisoners over time were presenting this information, were claiming that I've never seen anyone go exactly to sleep at the exact same time every day and sleep exactly 12 hours, exact. and then gets up at and in prison, like, so he misses his morning breakfast, he misses his morning whatever, because whatever time he gets up is beyond that. And he'd be like, everybody nobody would miss this. You would, if it was anything you would find a way to get up and, follow your available routines. But so that story was just so weird to me, because it's like, well, when we dream at night, we tend to think, of course, that we are ourselves in the dream. We tend to think, oh, I'm dreaming and I'm in this form and I'm whatever, right? The world is often the same and the people in it are the same, and people respond to me in my dreams the same, but we don't check a mirror and just see, do I look the same as, am I in the same body, the same? I never remember to do that, even when I'm lucid, to go and just check, do I look the same? So we're also playing this game of, I'm me in my dreams, but maybe we're not. Maybe we are actually in another form somehow when we're dreaming as well. It's just throwing that out there. It's another question.
I mean, you and I have a commonality in the Castaneda books we've studied, and the thing that's throwing me for a loop is the dreamer in the dreamed, in that they're saying we're not even the ones doing the dreaming. We're being dreamed from, could say, from that other place, if you like, from the original source, where if we're in a duplicate source. So, we're here, let's say we're being dreamed, and everything in this world seems to me to be upside down right now. I would say, the Ministry of Health is about death, the Ministry of Peace is about war, etc. We can go on and on. The politics that say they're helping you are fucking up the ass, etc., etc. The doctors are supposed to keep you healthy are not. The health and safety, CDC, we can go on and on. I'm sure a lot of our viewers would understand that everybody that, I run away when someone says, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for your health, as soon as someone comes in the door, goes, we're doing this for your benefit, you lock the doors, pull out your revolver and run the other way as fast as you can, in my opinion. So if we're in this backwards world and we're going to take a jump in, let's say, logic, I'm not the most logical fellow, but wouldn't it be maybe possible, at least since we're talking about the cave and the door out, that, we are being dreamed and something else does, if you want to say, the wholeness that people want to get back to, the better life, the better world, the thing that's being kept from us, and the destruction of the Egyptian artifacts and so much more. Maybe that's what is being, kept from us, or we're keeping from ourselves anyways.
And I get the sense, I know where you're going with that. And in a sense, I kind of agree as well, but I wouldn't say necessarily we're being dreamed so much as we're being highly controlled. Let's put it that way. That the free will we think we're here with, and we're making all sorts of choices and whatnot. And I don't think that's true at all. I think we're actually, a whole lot of stuff is literally pushed upon us. And even ways of speaking and acting and answering questions might even be, might be some sort of external manipulation on us. We have no idea how much free will we really have.
I mean, we certainly have a learned pattern from the time, like I'm in Japan right now, and, I've studied a lot of being Japanese, and I've talked with my wife, and obviously the children here are taken at a very young age, schooled, extra schooled, over extra schooled, super schooled, and then schooled some more, and then thrown into, whatever work environment. So there's no doubt that they are inculcated in a pattern of thinking, thought, actions, and what's possible. But that seems to be still an exterior force. I mean, maybe we're talking about the same thing. I'm not sure.
A really good example is like when somebody, and all of us are dealing with parasitic entities. I can say that almost 99% certainty that there are parasitic entities dealing with our world. In some cases, they're small, and they just suck off certain energy. They create certain experiences that they want to get their energy, and then they leave us alone. In many cases, those entities are controlling people's lives. They're actually literally really good because, as we know from Castaneda, the mind is not ours, right? So the mind is a foreign the mind is a foreign installation. So that parasitic entity has access to the mind. It doesn't need to do anything. But for example, this is a really good example. So we have a parasitic entity that needs us to get frustrated with something. Maybe that's how it eats our energy. Okay. So not only does it, so it doesn't just, this is so incredible when I started to see this, it doesn't need to just doesn't create frustration in our brain. No, what it does is it links to another person, which of course will be the same mind. My mind and your mind and someone else's mind are not individual. They're the same one. Our true mind, that's ours. But that's a perfect. There's a copy, right? The Castaneda called that a copy. Just bring up this word. So what it did, and I've seen this now in my life, it will trigger the other person to say something to me that frustrates me, and then I would get the energy of frustration. And I know, and all of a sudden that energy's gone. And then I had the forefront to ask, well, why did you say that? Like ask, why did you say that to me? I don't know. You didn't have any reason to go, no, I have no idea why I said that. Didn't sound like me at all. And I realized, that's the way this almost like etheric thing happens, where our stuff is not just triggering us, it's triggering others around us to re-trigger us back. So we have this bizarre interplay of energetic triggers going on all the time. And it requires thus a tremendous amount of awareness to constantly be recognizing, why is that going on outside of me? Why is that experience, or why is that person saying that? Why am I seeing that in this particular way? Because if we're not aware, the trigger hits instantaneously, and there would be the switch to lose energy. And only through our awareness would we be able to catch before the switch can go. And I get the sense that's a lot of what's in there in Active Side of Infinity. The more we can stay, he's calling it inner silence, but you might just call it awareness. So by having a true awareness to not keep flicking the switch, eventually you're not losing the energy source, and the thing that is draining the energy weakens.
Because you're the trigger, right? Like you say, you get triggered, but you are the trigger. I mean, something
you are the trigger, right? Or you allow the trigger to happen. I would say it that way. You allow it to. I would say I'm not the trigger itself, but I'm allowing it to happen by not being aware to not let it trigger on, to not stay in balanced awareness with what's going on.
Okay, so I want to like kind of focus this to everyone who might be listening, because it's something you and I chatted about. I'm not sure whether we did it on camera or off, but you had mentioned, I'm one of the only people personally who's recapitulated their lives, that actively have, sat down. I know several, including my wife, who's been doing it now for the last couple of years, because she's taken my lead, and I've watched her eyesight go half to the better, from -11 to -5 to 6 in 2 years. I've watched her energy go from being, docile to strong. I've watched her solve all of her own inner problems with her families, etc. And all through going through her own recapitulation, right? She calls it recapitulation, which is really cute because she doesn't have straight English, but so that helps me a lot. But and coming back to what you've mentioned, because if you understand yourself intimately, you become impossible to trigger. Obviously, hardened against the parasite is unpalatable, as Don put it. We're going to talk about the Castaneda books again. Right. Eventually, they leave you. Have you? I believe you said you have, but you've gone through your own version of recapitulation in your life. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I've done it twice. So I did one unbelievably complete, the way you're sort of supposed to do it, and that took 4.5 years. And then I did a second one, which I thought was going to be that way, and it was completely different. What was interesting about the second one, for those who are watching, because who are interested in recapitulation, is listen to Lorenzo. And like I say, Lorenzo's the only one I know personally who's completed it. I've known a number of people who started. I've known a number of people who even did it for a year, and then they gave up. They just stopped. So he's actually the only one I know that's done it and finished the job.
Well,
so it's another reason why I have, well, no, I mean, finished from the standpoint of round one, you're never finished, but, actually have done one round. But when I did my second round, what was so unique for me was, because in the first one, you're seeing, for me, I was seeing experiences, like giant, I would see chunks of, not the whole necessarily, but giant key chunks of it. In the second recapitulation I did, all I saw were seconds. So if in the first one there was a scene where it was me and a girl I was dating, and we were at a hotel, and there was an interaction with a like hotel clerk. Okay. So in the first one, I would say the whole experience. But when I did the second life recap, and it went very quick because all I would see was 2 seconds. And it was not so much what was happening, it was the complete detail energetically and the feeling in those couple of seconds. It was, so the whole experience was encapsulated in like these 1 or 2 seconds, and it was in the 1 or 2 seconds not of what was happening, but what was energetically going on. So it was so different, the second one that I did, and it was so it had an unbelievable depth to it from the feeling standpoint, but there was like, it's not like I was taking anything more away of seeing, oh, more, I said this, they said this, it was just this boom, boom, and then you move on. So I don't know if you noticed anything like that, but that was when I did my second one, it was so different than the first one.
Very different. Well, let me ask you, when you did your second one, or any you've done, subsequently, how many of you were in the room at the time, so to speak, metaphorical room? Was there more than one of you there? Like when you, let's say, like you had the interaction with this lady, let's say, and the hotel.
Okay, so in the scene I was seeing.
Right. How many of you were in there? And then I can answer from my perspective.
In the second one?
Yeah, I mean, take your pick, but let's say in the second recapitulation, so everything happened in out of time, it would have to, if you said it happened like, you got the charge.
I would say almost, it's like I knew what the event was. So I knew the event was starting, what the event was and who was there. But then when the recap sort of hit the switch, it was just me.
No, but I mean, how many, like, I'll give you an example. When I'm doing it now, I see myself then, I see myself now, and I see an observer with each really powerful moment. So I see from 3 points when I'm doing a good recapitulation now. Like, I understand who I was 25 years ago, which isn't the same man I am now.
Right.
I understand who I am now as best I can, in this crazy body. And then I also, not all the time, but occasionally when I'm lucky, let's say, it seems to be a dispassionate, you could say it's the before the copy, another something or other awareness, call it spirit, call it my double, call it George, it doesn't really matter, watching at the time as well.
So is that I'm curious. So is the watcher watching the recap experience? Is it watching the Lorenzo doing the recapitulation? Is it watching both? Like, is it observing?
I think it's just taking in everything, right? It's like I said, obviously it's happening out of thought, to get this, but the feeling is like, this is how I'm getting you information when I go, for so long, my recapitulation was, why people did bad things to me, or why I wasn't whatever good enough. And, we talked about all the things that the parasites eat, all the bad feelings. But then, later it was like, oh my goodness, that voice kept saying, watch how you're being bad to other people. Watch how you're being unloving. Well, I don't want to judge it. So unloving to someone else, unloving to yourself. And maybe also the third voice, what it was telling me at the time was I was always there, right? So even though, I'll give an example, my mother, when I was young, would tell me to do annoying things to some of my sisters at times because she was crazy, thought they were talking about her, saying things behind her back. My mother has her own and still has her own challenges. So she would say, at the time we had a similar name. I was Howie growing up. I've taken Lorenzo since then, which is funny. You and I are chatting. Okay. So she would say, Howie, go in and steal your sister's diary, or Howie, go in and listen in on the phone. At the time you could listen in on phones. This is when I was 8 or 9 or something like that. Because I think your sister's talking about me poorly to her friends, or she's writing bad things about me in her diary. Like I said, my mother was an orphan in the war from Russia, Poland. So she had her own challenges. And at the time, I'm giving people an example, the part of me that was not so nice would go, I get to bother my sisters. All right. My mother said it was okay. So I would go just before I would go do this. And I'm a little sad to say now I did it quite often. I was a bit of a bastard growing up when I was, first son, etc. I recall in that third point, the voice going, don't do that. You don't want to do that. That's not a nice thing to do to your sisters, right? And so I would ignore that voice and go do it anyways. When I was 8, 9, 10, I'm looking at it now. So now I'm going, isn't that interesting? That observer who's with me now, when I'm looking at it 40 years in the future, so to speak,
Yeah.
was always with me at the time going, don't do that. So that's the
Yeah.
best way I can explain having these three
Now
people.
now I understand. Yeah. Now I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had that experience in my recapitulations as well, where I've heard this and again it's heard. I don't see it. I wouldn't have I didn't see like you're saying a third
Well, yeah, it's
object, for example.
metaphorical.
I don't like that.
I agree. Yeah.
Metaphorical. But yeah, I've had this where I've heard the internal, you might say the internal discussion or the internal message or the words that are coming that are seemingly, here's the me I know myself to be, here's the thinking me, what's it, and here's this thing that
Right.
is me, and it's me, but is it me? Is it not me? Is it a part of me? Is it something that looks over me? I don't know. But yeah, and it's giving certain, we can call it guidance. We can call it,
Sure.
you might say. So something quite similar. I've gone through those things as well, where and how quickly, of course, the regular mind would just override it.
Like in
you
heartbeat.
might want to think about this. You might want to think about this before you do it. No,
Right.
I don't need to think about it.
I don't need
just
to.
Off you go.
Mom said it was
so,
okay.
So yeah, I have noticed that.
Yeah.
I have noticed that for sure in my recapitulation, and I still notice. And now, I guess because of the recap, I notice it more in my day-to-day experience. That doesn't mean I always listen to it, or I always follow it, or I always pay attention to it, but I certainly recognize it's there. That there is something that's trying to say, and if we're turning this back, exiting the matrix, or whatever we want to classify that, there's also something we have to, I think, learn to trust. So, if I'm saying the whole world's insane, this place is crazy, you can't trust anything, all these things outside yourself are manipulating you. Well, there also then must be something that isn't. There must be something that is also being true to you or with you or about you. And a part of the question also then has to be, if we spin this around, is, well, what is this part or this place or this connection point where we feel we can get truth from, where we feel we can get honest answers from? And how do we recognize that's the connection we've got? And I would say, yeah, I would agree with you in the sense that recap can help us figure out which part that is, or which area that is, because it's been there before. We've just usually ignored it.
I would agree. I mean, for me, and I think an understanding, and I'm having a deeper conversation with you than I get to do with most, looking at it this way, and it could be because you've done the recapitulation. Castaneda said, I found for myself, it's a non-negotiable prerequisite of getting free, of getting out of the cave. If you do make this dream, let's say, whether you're triggered or coerced or tricked or inculcated or bribed, beaten, however you want to look at it, and you want to unmake this dream or get out of the cave, you would need to, in my opinion, understand yourself a lot more deep than most people are willing to go, right down to the dirty toenails, so to speak, if you like, that you haven't cleaned in 25 years or whatever. And so, people are looking for an easy answer out. Well,
yeah. And of course, we also have to remind ourselves that we're sharing this Castaneda stuff to people, because, we both read this stuff detailed. He talked about the importance of the recapitulation for stalkers, the type of people who are dealing with reality in the mind on a day-to-day basis, that those he classified as dreamers, those who spend most of their focus exploring alternate realities, the recap isn't as important. You might say that doesn't mean they don't do it. It just means their focus is on other things, as opposed to a stalker will dream less than someone doing the recap. And I think that because they're getting a lot of that, they're getting their recapitulation in a different way, as opposed to like we're saying, we all recapitulate.
Gotcha.
It's just the what we're talking about is a structured, we're way we're presenting it and we're talking about it, for those who don't realize, we're talking about a structured practice, as opposed to some people will get their recapitulation without needing a practice. Things will just appear to them.
Right.
A song will come on the radio, that song will trigger something, and boom, they get the memory. So the recapitulation is happening for people. It's just, do you need a practice to do it? Or do you need to be, you might say, aware of your environment and what's going on to know when the moment is appearing for you? And now you need to say, okay, I have to stop everything else and focus. My recap is happening now. So I'm just kind of sharing that with people, that there's, you know, you don't necessarily have to sit down and be in a closet for 8 hours a night and recapitulate. It can happen in many different ways that's right for you. But like Lorenzo says, it does need to occur no matter who you are, to clean out and see through and understand things. It's just the way it gets done will be different for everybody.
Sure, living recapitulation. I know of a buddy
Yeah.
that you know talks about that, and he says it's a lot faster than sitting in a closet for 6 years and writing everything out, because you can in your daily basis you'll always eventually become, or you can become, aware of that third voice or the third point. Let's say the other one
Right.
watching you, and if you become smart enough to listen all the time, and I'm still struggling as well, then
Right.
you can get the recapitulation done. There's probably a billion ways to do it. I'm guessing as many as there are people
Right.
that want to do this in their way.
And I'm sure that would be the that's part of the goal, I think, of doing the practice, is to eventually get to the point where you don't need to do the practice anymore. So, it took me whatever 4.5 years, but that's probably because I was just too stubborn, and I wasn't learning how to link into getting it in other ways. So I had to, because my big breakthrough experience happened when I was finished. So the whole 4.5 years, I saw lots, I had energetic changes, but the big event, or you might say the big thing that happened, wasn't until after I was finished. So had I learned things differently, I maybe could have had that breakthrough years before, and like you say, saved a lot of time.
What
But it took
can
me
may I ask you what the breakthrough was, or I can share mine, because I've had a similar rock bottom experience. For me, it was hitting rock bottom, let's say, in my life. I hit.
okay. Mine was I write about it completely in Falling for Truth. I give the whole experience in the book, but I was in a computer shop of a friend of mine sending an email. My mother, I was visiting my mother at the time, and she didn't have a computer at home, and I had to send email to somebody. And I was sending it to a particular woman who was linked to one of my first girlfriends. And the computer shop fell away, and I was literally back on the train with this girl. We were breaking up. We were having an actual, I'm going all the detail, but we were having a breakup experience. And I was literally on the train again. We were going through it.
Mm.
And I watched it I not watched it. I experienced it taking place again.
Mm.
And it was when I remember getting off the train, and there was this, and it's like this feeling of like being totally, yeah, it's a good beaten down. That's a good way of describing it. I was like literally stomped at that point. And and I also saw something inside said, well, we have to go, we have to keep going. We have to go forward now. And it just erased those 10 minutes. The 10 minutes of the experience were erased from my mind. And for the rest of my life, I believed our breakup was some sort of mutual kind of discussion we had in the house or whatever, that it didn't happen in this stark, boom kind of way on this train ride home. And once I got there, I was like, holy crap, that's my whole life is altered. It's different. It's different than I ever thought. And it explains what I was hiding the rest of my life. The end part of this, and I'll let you go on to yours. The end part of it, then I took, though, the Castaneda suggestion of just getting the hidden experience from the recapitulation is not enough. You have to add a not doing to it. So I took the not doing of tracking down this girl who had no idea where she lived or what happened to her. It took me months to track her down, and I called her. I called her to apologize for some things that had taken place that led to the choice of no longer being together, because I had seen in a parallel reality that I had married her. So this reality, certain things happened that I didn't. And it was an energetically charged conversation. I talk about that and the aftermath of it. I think it's like 15 pages that I go through all of this. If anyone's interested and you want to grab Falling for Truth, because you can read, I explain it in complete detail. I literally almost died the next day after calling her. But when it was all done, it was finished. The whole thing energetically was completed, and there's nothing of that experience left in me that holds any kind of energetic charge at all now. It's just It would be like hearing an event from a friend. That's all. It's an amazing whole thing, but it was a long experience that included not just the recap, not just I call it spontaneous recap, but also the not doing experience, which if I hadn't done the not doing, if I hadn't called her, it would still be going on. It would still be within, I think.
It's
So
very
that was
interesting.
mine.
It's a good point. I mean, you're sharing basically the because part of this conversation is the key to getting out, of the cave, shall we say. And I think without speaking about it directly, which in my opinion is almost impossible, you've given at least one facet, of this key and why recapitulation is so useful. I mean, that part of my recapitulation wasn't so grandiose, other than I just realized I was a complete asshole. And, I was still being an asshole, and I was still living in my ego, even though I was telling myself I was a nice person. And, in that moment, when I was with a friend of mine, we'll say, and and he was visiting a foreign country, and he was in my apartment, and I just wanted to be alone with my wife, and didn't realize how mean I was being, right? Or how selfish, and how, and how absolutely horrendous, until I looked over and I saw the look in my wife's eye. That was just it. She was just horrified how she was looking at me at the time, right? And so I kind of had a similar experience. I kind of fell through the floor. And because I wouldn't believe anyone else, right? Because sometimes I think that's why you get into relationships with a man or a woman, or even a best friend or a dog, whatever it is that you want to trust. And I think everyone needs maybe at some point something outside themselves to trust, especially when you're lost in your own reflective insanity, which we all get to in this reality. And she just looked at me like, someone I never wanted to look at me in that way. And she was honest, and I went, whoa, literally like you, I fell off the chair, tears started coming down my eyes. I left the room. I went into the other room. It was a small Japanese apartment, so it wasn't so far away to get to the other room, but I went into the other room. And like you, then at that moment, though, all the similar experiences I've had kind of fell on me like a ton of shit, let's say. I would like to say bricks, but that would be too nice. Let's say you can call it hardened and kiln fired shit, if you like, that they maybe make into bricks in some part of the world. But anyways, fell on me when I realized, all those times, that I was telling myself I was being nice, or I was telling myself I was being kind, or I was telling myself I was doing something for your wife or for the reason or for them. I was basically full of it. I was just considering myself and justifying everything. And, that was one of my main recapitulatory experiences. And this was, after I got out of being sick in the hospital for about a week. So I was at my wit's end at the time in trying to figure out, what was going on with my life. And, to this day, if I don't act at being kind, I get lost at not being kind. I'll talk about myself, because my habit, even Castaneda said, by the time you come to this practice, your personality is already set. You're already who you are. Like when you're 18 or 22, it's like, I don't change. I'm not really Lorenzo from Howdie. And you're not really, you can fill in your own story, but you get to take that pause from your recapitulation and realize, wait a minute, I'm going to be an asshole again. Better stop that. Because my first reaction is still one of let's say that source, and until I've learned not to act on my first impulse.
Or really one I learned from my recap, which was also quite shocking for me, simply, but it also I think has to do with leading the matrix, is how many loops were running in my life.
Right.
And I don't just mean external things, force of how many loops I was running, how many things I was doing the same way again and again and again and again. And just very robotic, how robotic things were in my life. That's the best way of describing it. And I think that's also a big step, is to see that and start deciding, even though I'm being pushed to do this or say this or act in this way, I'm going to do something else now, because I don't want to keep the robot loop going. And to me, that's also, I think, a part of it, because for sure, I don't think you can certainly exit the matrix if you are running a loop of in any way, shape, or form. The loops have to be, the loops have to go.
100%.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, something I've come to in all of this, even while we're talking, even though a mutual friend of ours, Campbell, I've talked to, people that have looked back at ancient history or alternative, we mentioned it briefly, heavenly existences of beauty, wonder, and abundance. You have to make yourself into the kind of person, I think your consciousness has to match your dream. and if your consciousness isn't matching a dream of abundance, wonder, and beauty, and endless free energy, or whatever you want to call it, you're just not going to, get matched into that dream. And I would say that's the way, perhaps, of understanding the cave, the cage, the matrix we're in. Is we're going to get back to something you and I disagreed on before, and in that I think if your dream is horrible in some way, it's because you are, you could say, allowing it, if you like. I'll be polite. You are allowing it. I think you're making it, personally, one way or the other. Even if it's just by allowing it, that is still an action. Obviously, allowance is still an action of a disallowance. And I don't mean it's your fault, because I don't want anyone to send me any more of those things like when I was abused when I was 4 and 6, and it's not my fault. I'm not saying any of these so-called bad things that have happened is anyone's fault. I am simply saying that if there's an experience in your life you don't like, it's kind of up to you to change it one way or another. And I think the only way you can really change it is,
again, it's slightly different. I would say now we have probably been programmed externally by something else. So I would say we're manifesting it only because we've been tricked into manifesting it.
I agree.
We have been that's how I would describe it. We somewhere, probably even before we were born, we agreed to, we made these weird agreements and these weird contracts to these beings who tricked us into thinking this would be good for our development. This would be good for our learning. Oh, this will burn your karma. If you see, in your last life, you were so bad, but if you just allow this bad thing to happen to you now, that'll even out your karma. Oh, that's great. I'll do that, without ever sitting back and saying, maybe that's all bullshit, that this is all just garbage. And I've just been tricked again. And so it's like I agree and I disagree, and partially the same thing, because I can so many of these things that when someone disagrees with me, I can always see how that's also not totally false. It's not like I never disagree. I can never fully disagree. I mean, I don't probably comes across in different places like, well, he's disagreeing because it's opposites. Like, well, no, I'm showing that in a way, both sides exist in a dual world. Both sides are part of the package. And you can always never just show one part of the package when you're explaining this stuff. It's so difficult. Both pieces have to be there to kind of get this third overview, like you're saying, that, okay, so this is the totality of what's going on. We have to see both pieces equally.
I think something that I've really never talked with anyone about, other than a buddy of mine who understands it, and again, we'll talk with Castaneda, is, Don Juan had mentioned that awareness can be manipulated. So in that way, I agree with you in that it's very easy to force someone to see a light, a pattern, a trick, a way to be alive. And I still think it's a choice to follow through on it or not, but I'm just talking about myself. I think eventually, if even you're being tricked to beat someone or hit someone, no one's moving your hands. I would stay still, even though it's still you moving your hands, and that's maybe why you have to get out of the parasite mind altogether to be free, which would be my guess.
Good example is a hypnotist, right? The hypnotist tells the people on stage that they're, chickens, or they're on a boat. They're on a boat, and even though they might tell you later, they might say, "I knew I was on stage, but I also knew I was on the boat." So it's also this and that's just a stage hypnotist. So if we start thinking about these, we'll call them dark force beings that run this reality, the kind of tricks they have. I mean, what we see from a hypnotist on a stage, that's just like so we can see and I know Richard Rose, from when he was still alive, he wanted his students to study hypnosis, not because he wanted them to perform hypnosis. He wanted them to see how easy it is we can be manipulated, how easy it is. I mean, that's advertising in a simplest form. Advertising is manipulation. Advertising is putting a feeling to a product. So they say, well, this ad is terrible. This was the stupidest ad ever. And you ask them, what was the ad for? And they'll tell you. Yeah. See, the point is, they don't care if it's stupid. They care that when you're at that place and you see the product, you're going to get some sort of feeling memory to say, oh, I need the product in order to regain the feeling. It's manipulation. So when we start, his point was, the manipulation is going on so many levels, and we don't even recognize it. And if we're seeing it just in the material world, once we start talking the spiritual realm, the manipulations get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we learn how to deal with the manipulations here first, because if we can't block these here, like you say, if somebody takes in the news directly into them, well, they're being manipulated. If someone can at least say, I think the news might be manipulating me, you're at least aware to be thinking, what could be true, what's not true, how do I, so you're creating a filter at least to not block it, but you're allowing the examination of the filter. And I think as we learn to do that in our reality here, we can start applying that to bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger things, to start seeing even like spirituality itself, as we know, which is it is also a form of manipulation. The whole spiritual marketplace is manipulating us to buy their product, as opposed to really trying to get us to see what's true. So it's there's so many weird levels of this we're dealing with. Yeah.
Are you trying to get out of the cave, Howdie? Is that your goal in life?
Yeah. No, because that would be a negative. That would be a negative goal. Okay. So my goal is to return home, whatever that is.
It's a good goal.
Whatever home or truth is, that's what will be. If by some chance I find out that home is actually bizarrely in the cave, that there is no out of the cave, okay, that's fine. I would be fine with that answer. But my answer is, if I try, it's always don't have the negative, or you're in a sense, you're creating the negative you don't want. So yeah, I would classify it as returning home, or being centered in what's true.
Being free, I guess. It's a good way to put it too, I would say. Well, this has been great. Maybe we've come to a natural conclusion of our chat here. I didn't expect it so fast or so beautiful, but I think our last chat was a little confrontational. I had all kinds of ideas about what we were going to talk about now, a little bit, not so much. I rewatch it. I'm going, okay, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to confront Howdie on this, and I'm just kind of like putting it down. And at the end, though, I think I've become better friends with Howdie. I'm going to say to our viewers, because he stood up and allowed me to share my perspective. I allowed him to share his perspective. And I think he was very right in what he said, is that there's always more than one perspective. There's probably 100 to understand any idea. And your truth is probably just yours anyways. It couldn't be anyone else's. And perhaps I think that's anyway one of the great things that can come from any little bit of confrontation that we have with people, is if you don't then block it off and say, well, somebody had a different opinion than me, so I'm going to stop speaking to them. It's like, take it to the next level now. Okay, so now you've had a little bit of a shakeup. Now we go to the next level, and you can start, okay, how do we now build on these different ideas, and where do those different ideas start to, instead of looking like they're going apart, where can these ideas start to come together? And in a way, that's kind of what our talk today is, through various subjects that are we share. We now started to see how slightly different opinions have similar roadways. Yeah, it's true. I had to see for myself as being, I'm a confrontational man. I'll go back to also being a selfish man. I had to understand myself through my recapitulation. So, I like starting fights, when I was growing up, and it came to a promise I made a long time ago that I would never listen to anybody. And it served me well, because I didn't like the way the world was telling me what to do. And it got me to where I am today, because, it was a good point, but, it's anything 100%, too much medicine. Eventually, probably somebody's telling you something you should listen to, right? Or there's some advice coming that's good to let in. So I had to realize that about myself, that, I was still not being honest by being one way, because there's always a multiple level of ways of doing things. And, perhaps that's the only door out, exiting the cave, is to understand yourself, to see the many possibilities, to figure out, what's working for you, how you're good and bad in relation to yourself, let's say, and I love this story you said about recapitulation. To me, that's pretty much could go into your album of power, the tales that we're going to tell. And maybe one of our next conversations, we can get into those sort of levels. If you're into it, I'd be happy to chat about it one day.
Hopefully once I feel ready for it. Yeah, that would be great. I'm still in the process of dissecting it all.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the smile that came on too. I saw the 8-year-old Howdie come out for a second. For me, for me, it's to remember the play that you had when you were little as well, to bring it back, put it into action right now. And then to realize you never know where your new friends, where your new information, and where something powerful is going to come. So Howdie, I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate you sharing time with me. There's not so many of us out here that are, dedicated, if you want to say, to going home, being free, and in that we have a common goal, I would say. So thank you so much for what you've done and what you've shared with us, and I'm delighted to chat with you again one day.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Great to be here. Great to talk to you, and continue your talks you're having with Campbell. There's lots of good things going on there as well that I've checked in that's going on. So yeah, we just keep doing what we're doing, and we just hope something valuable comes not only for us but others from the conversations we have.
Yeah, please like and subscribe. Campbell and I, since you mentioned them, we're going to do How to Live Like a Totarian. We're going to go really along the lines of what Howdie and I talked about in relation to saying it's a level of consciousness. So, I appreciate all of everything that everyone shared. So like, subscribe, comments, please keep them coming. It brought this conversation about. I'm happy to share more with Howdie as it's possible for both of us. And once again, thank you so much, Howdie. I hope to see you again soon.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say. Nothing now gonna get in my way.